All right, it is 6 o'clock, everyone. I would like to welcome you to the Hudsonville Public Schools Board of Education work session for September 18th, 2023. We'll call the work session to order. First up is approval of our agenda. I can have a motion and a second. So moved. Dawn?
Support.
And support from Nick. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All right. Recognition of visitors and hearing of people present. And Robin?
Nobody signed
So we can move right on to our discussion items, and first up, we have our technology bid review.
Thank you. So the bid tab, if it looks tough, it is. But we just, the CBD, and Chris is here from CBD, and our technology department led by Jeff Smucker have done a wonderful job with all the bond projects. I mean, we had $8 million in just revenue for the bond, strictly technology projects, plus CBD and Jeff are overseeing millions of other dollars of technology projects that aren't strictly just technology, like strictly technology is a projector. They're also getting into the cameras, the access systems, everything else, because technology is so prevalent now in our building systems that they're doing great work. So if I could just separate these projects, when you look at this page, which I made it, I couldn't have made it any smaller. No, we did increase the font as much as we could to try to get on one page. The first column is a base bid. In that column is a base bid for just pure cabling. And if you follow from left to right along there, the second column is a base bid. After the first column, you have base, alternate, base, alternate, base, alternate. And then the last three columns, it's base bid, and then alternate, alternate. Also, one of the things that we're always concerned about, boards and superintendents are always concerned about is, hey, do you have enough good competitive pricing? And in all the columns, except the last three, we do. You know, we've got enough other bidders to really say, you know, we have good pricing. The last three, the access control systems, Chris and Jeff have done a lot of work comparing back to our other projects. We're actually received that base bid, that $249,000 amount for access control systems. That's better pricing than we got for the 5-6 building, and we did have competitive quotes on that. In the 5-6 building, we call it a greenfield. It was just all new construction, quite different construction, a lot lower cost. In particular, what we got out of the last, this project with the access control system is we got far better cabling prices. So just to meet those concern points, I mean, if I answer that because you would have asked me if I wouldn't have told you. We do feel we have good pricing there relative to other bids, other projects where we did get competitive pricing. So another thing that if you looked at the two reports, this bid review report, we spent a lot of time with both Moss and Parkway talking about the flexibility that was going to be needed for these projects. In particular, with Park Elementary, there's going to be changes in schedules. There's just going to be changes, and they need to be ready and willing to meet those changes. And I think I asked them 4 different ways, Chris, and they said the size of the project isn't substantial enough in any one phase to really be an issue for either one of their companies. So, but they did promise, so when they say they can't meet those, if that ever did happen, they won't. They won't say that, because we talked about it so many times. They'll meet the schedules. And what happens is, like, we're gonna do back to front remodel here, and sometimes they tie into it once they open it up. They see there's a better way to approach the project. And they may have planned to deploy their labor this month, but they can't get out there for a month and a half, 2 months. They need to be flexible to meet those schedules. So we talked about all those things, and they promised they would. So if I could just do the Parkway, get the three lines out of the way here that make up $304,000. The base bid there is for one of the things we're doing across the district, and you'll see it. We're changing the external access card system out. We used to have a system that worked on how many bit encryption, Chris?
It's a smaller, like 26, but it's a lower kilowatt frequency that's
So the
easier
new
to
system
copy.
works on how many bit encryption?
You have about 13.56, it's like 100.
Okay, so far more secure system, far easier to control, and one of the problems we had is it just wasn't what you would think of as a district building management system. It really worked on that door, that door, that door, and it had to be programmed differently now. Our external card system is a lot safer, it's a lot easier to work with. We can keep more current, but we're doing that across the entire district. So this will take Allward, Bauer, Georgetown, Jamestown Upper, Jamestown Lower, Park, and South, and wrap them into the project in the base bid. It also covers the areas that we're touching as new construction and renovation construction for both Park and Bauer. That's what's in the base bid. Second column is, we asked them to give us pricing to do the external doors at both middle schools and ECC, and we're happy with that price for $35,000. And the last column is an upgrade, is essentially a 3-year warranty. So, any questions on that?
A question on, probably on all of them, it's Chris, right?
Yes.
So some of it is current system upgrade, cable upgrade, wherever the system is, and some of it is new construction, right? Okay. How, just in general, more broadly, how do we monitor, will we monitor going forward the need for system updates? Not tied to new construction, but, okay, it's been 5 years and we need to upgrade badging or whatever. And you're not talking to that now, we need to know the numbers, I'm not talking about that after, but that's something that, looking through the bids and what, when, where, that I was curious about.
Okay.
We can cover that after the numbers.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions on the access, the external access? Okay. And I said that wrong, I apologize. The last column isn't the warranty. It's it's adding another allowance to take care of the internal renovations at ECC. I'm sorry about that. So column 3, so the total recommendation for Parkway, the base bid of $249,000 plus 2 alternates, one of $35,000, one of $20,000. Our total recommended authorization for Parkway is $304,273.40. All comes from the bond fund. So, thank you. If any other questions, we can always go back to that. If you have any other questions. So, the next, if you would flip to the second column in, and we changed names a lot, I'm sorry, but this, we used to call this audiovisual, now we're calling it multimedia systems. Multimedia systems is better industry language, that's what it's called in the business. I always called it classroom audiovisual. But, so the column, the second from the left, $176,940, that's the base bid, and it covers the all the spaces that we're touching with construction at Park and Bauer. So just simple terms in terms of classroom spaces. We've got 2 classrooms and a gym at Bauer, and we're touching 9 internal classrooms at Park. That's the price for that. That includes a projector, a new projector mount. If you've been in some of our classrooms, sometimes they're not not up to current standards. A screen, classroom voice enhancement, document camera, and we're also replacing the current old cabling with HDMI cabling, which it just is a far better standard, and it just improves the quality of the room. So we're also doing that in the gymnasiums in both those buildings. That's the base bid. The larger amount, the $277,000, we asked them to give us alternate pricing, also give us pricing on all the other rooms in Bauer and Park. They're the buildings, they have some of the oldest projectors, there are some other buildings that have some old projectors, but all of these projectors that we're doing, it would be 26, remaining 26 classrooms at Bauer and 17 at Park. That's what the $277,000 is for. And we just think, Jeff and I were back and forth, Doug and I were talking about this, it just makes more sense to do this together instead of having them get into the ceiling, get to the MDFs. It's just much more economical for them to do all this work together. And that's why we got good pricing from them to do this. The next bid, and we did this in alternates to prove that we were getting the best pricing, is to replace the public address systems at Park and Bauer. We upgraded Forest Grove this summer. It's part of the project out there. And this, in very, very technical terms, Park and Bauer are the next worst when it comes to the building PA systems. So we're in the buildings, we're ripping up some of the ceilings. It's the best time to do it. The alternate for $19,990 is to go back and do some demo and add some speakers at Forest Grove. We went through and did the work, and there's some interior classrooms we didn't spec out in the original scope. Some of them are small group type rooms. There's some places in bathrooms we didn't reach, we don't have the right sound, so this adds 16 interior speakers and some exterior speakers at Forest Grove. We're also recommending we do that work. Any other questions on that? Okay. The next, if you've been in any of our new spaces, especially the 5-6 building, the connector of the high school, you'll notice the new clock and emergency notification system. It's a panel, it's got a clock on it, and if you put emergency messages on it, it's got a speaker on it, it's got scrolls. That's our new district standard. So that's due all of Park and Bauer. And to go back in and do a little bit of demo on the project at Forest Grove, it's basically cleanup that we didn't get in the initial scope, Forest Grove. We put that in the base bid on this, so that's $148,000. Next column, $20,000, is the 3-year warranty. I'm sorry, I said it was that in that other project, but this is actually the 3-year warranty on that equipment. And finally, all the way back to the left, the $62,248. This is a bundle, a cable bundle to do the clocks, the audiovisual, the multimedia systems, public address system, multimedia, public address, and the clocks. This is pulling low voltage cabling for those projects. And if you look up above, you'll see the Parkway line. Parkway has a lower cost than Moss for just that section, but if you add the public address and clocks to that, the bundle of cost is cheaper for Moss. And Parkway did bid on the multimedia systems, which is the audiovisual type things. So, sorry, it's a lot, but these are big projects, pretty complicated projects, and Chris and Jeff simplified them a great deal just to get it in the bid tab in these documents, so I thank them for that. Any other questions besides Ken's questions on sustainability?
So somewhat with sustainability would also be the thing of compatibility. Always concerned about, okay, even from school to school and integrating some of the facilities that we're getting some new, we have some old, as well as usability. I'm assuming a lot of this is similar to what our staff has been using within the office when it comes to the time room clock and emergency system and all of that. That would be my question.
Yes. So, I would say to the comfort of tech staff, I mean, us too, it is compatible. I mean, we bid it to the spec of being compatible, but then some people will build different equipment. But this is the same equipment, the same manufacturers, and the same vendor, integrator, what they call it, same integrator. So yes, it will be, this is compatible.
Moss is a new vendor for us, right? That name doesn't ring a bell to me.
They did I should be able to think of more projects. They did a few other projects for us, but the first big project they did for us was this same work at the high school and the two middle schools,
Okay.
the multimedia.
If you remember leaving the high school auditorium during board meetings when they were there, and there was always a white van parked there that said Moss on it. They were doing the third shift.
Oh,
change
yes,
over.
yeah, I do, yes, I do recall. Yeah, Moss was really fancy.
So what we're doing with this bid is hopefully we don't have to go back like we did with Forest Grove and do some things. We're just gonna take care of it all at once with the park and Bauer. Is that the goal?
Good question, yeah, but that's the improved design scope. It's better, with this is a better plan. It's given more coverage.
And so like, yeah, with the extensive renovations at the park, even the rooms that aren't touched, everything's gonna be the same. They're not working off the two systems then?
Yes.
Cool.
Yes. The only thing that'll be different for Park, we're not doing all of the internal classroom door swipes. We don't have that in there. But we've got all of the multimedia systems.
Do any of our other new buildings have internal door swipes?
5, 6 does.
Or 6?
And the new space, basically it's our new space program. So the spaces we're renovating and doing at Park will have that. It's just the existing classrooms won't have it.
The desire to get the whole district, it's just gonna take time and resources.
Can imagine it's probably not cheap.
Yeah.
And bond funds again, Pat, for this? So in looking at what we had for our extras, is this considered extras or was this actually written in the bond fund?
So we, in the original scope, we had clocks where we knew we wanted to do a clock, we just hadn't developed the exact clock. But so the doors, we knew we wanted to do the doors. We've been testing this here at this building for 5 years. It's been a while. So, yeah, the types of projects, yes, we had scope. We hadn't settled, because technology changes so much, we didn't have all the design, the product spec'd out like we have now.
This was earmarked as technology in the bond, and that's what it's
Okay.
So yes, it still is coming back, but the scope of it has been adjusted based on, and some escalation in cost when it comes to door swipes look different than we did 4 years ago when we passed it on.
Which is always so scary because 4 or 5 years from now, again, it's
Right there.
different, but just like computer.
Retinal scans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Bracelets. Yes.
And your arm will be through it.
Good question, thank you.
Any other questions for Pat?
Should do it if I answered Ken's
You
sustainability
did.
question.
You covered it.
Thanks.
All right. Next up, we have the Hughes Home.
Yeah, there was a letter shared with, it was in the board, I think Dr. Cooper got a copy of it too. And I just wanted to maybe have a discussion if needed, but to share to make sure that the board was aware that there's definitely questions about the Hughes Home, which is located directly east of us here. There was a house between the two that is now where there's some green, well, it's going to be green space, but a couple of portables are there in the Hughes Home. Don, you're intimately understand exactly the value of this house.
My sister lived there since
87.
1987, yeah. In fact, she took care of my kids a couple days a week, so my children also spent a lot of time there.
So I think this person that sent this, gentleman that sent this letter, he gives some historical background to it. I did reach out to him and said, listen, our goal was not to purchase the house so that we could get rid of the house. It was to purchase the house because the property in which it was on, it really helped out with Park Elementary. So at this point, we are using the garage in the back for some storage. We haven't had discussions on selling the house, moving the house, or anything other, but I wanted to share with the board that we don't really have plans for it. I do know our plan is not to demolish it. That has significance to this community, and we recognize that also. If you notice those 4 properties along Van Buren, they're extremely deep properties, and 2 of the properties we'll be using as laydown areas for construction work for Park Elementary, and also construction access. We have a bus loop and a parent loop, but we don't want to mix construction traffic with that. So we're going to use a little bit of a side road on the other between the Hughes Home and the portables, kind of a gravel road back there for construction. But just want to have the discussion if the board has any questions about the home. Our goal is to not bring a wrecking ball in, but I want to make sure that conversation took place here.
Will we be still doing upkeep to the home because it's starting to look a little...
So we take care of all the outdoor maintenance for it. They cut grass, they take care of it, plow if needed in the winter. But you know, a home that isn't lived in, it can get tired on the inside. You know, if you go home tonight and you realize the heat's not working, you'll probably do something about it tomorrow. We try to do the best we can on the inside. At some point, we'll have to have discussions on what does that look like on the inside and go from there. So.
Has there been any conversation with either the library or the city? You know, obviously there are homes that they've moved before with it having historical value, historical societies. Has anybody reached out, I guess, or not? Is that something that at some point we want to consider?
I'm sure we could consider that. I don't think we're to the point of saying we have to move it soon, we need it now. I think if for any reason the expansion of the construction work at Park Elementary impacted the location of the home, then yes, we'd be reaching out and say, what would that look like? If someone were to purchase it, whether it's historical or a family wants to move it. They moved the house over by Allen and Barry. And actually, it's pretty nice. The inside was nice to begin with, now the outside looks nice also. So yes, I think we can have that conversation. We don't have an emergent need for it, that's part of it. In Park Elementary design, if all of a sudden you have to add on to Park Elementary and you need to build a couple of classrooms that direction, then we'd be in a little bit of a tight time frame, but right now, good question.
Now, the home or the property, it's not designated, especially designated on like a national register of historic places or anything like that. Okay.
The actual property itself, the farm, was donated to the school back in '55, I think it was. And then later there was also property for the Hughes Park, to be dedicated to Hughes Park. So they just parallel each other, and yeah, the property it sits on right now. So.
It's cool to read about the history of it. Appreciate him putting in all the time to do that.
It tells a pretty cool story.
It does, yeah.
It does, yeah, it really does. It's fascinating.
So the person that sent, The person that sent the letter has no connection to the district.
We had a good conversation. It was he was very happy to hear, because rumors spread that we're gonna knock it down and like slow down. We're not gonna.
Well, I was wondering that, like, there had to be a reason why.
I don't know where. I'm sure it's just like anything else, probably on social media. But,
Good to know though, that
Yeah.
we're gonna take care of it. And
yeah. But I do think at some point we'll have to figure out what to go with the inside, just with occupancy.
Yeah.
Any other questions on the Hughes Home? All right, next up is our middle school courses.
So just like the elementary courses that were presented, I believe, in August, this is just really trying to align our practices with the board policy, and trying to catch up to that. And so we did some legwork and found some approval dates of some of the courses through the history. But we want to make sure that we are starting from ground zero and then moving forward with those processes to continue that update. Knowing that some of the courses, for example, kind of recently approved at the bottom, that this will be the process that we continue to follow to update those with the links and so forth. So, any questions about that process?
Does middle school have like a book like the high school does that kids actually can look at and see?
For some of them, so they are linked in there. In particular, the elective courses have those specifics, if you will, where the high school just offers so many more courses. But yes, those elective courses in particular have those course descriptions for kids, and then they oftentimes will take that home and make their plan, whether first, second, third, fourth choices are.
I think we talked about this, Amy, but refresh my memory, if you would, how we assess attendance, how would we assess demand for courses? If they're dropping off and they get to a point where you go, gosh, it just isn't worthwhile offering this course anymore. My kids are interested.
Absolutely. So I think that just happens kind of naturally with our counselors as they are continuing to kind of evaluate on an annual basis. Sometimes the courses are not offered every quarter in the middle school. Sometimes they're only offered a couple quarters, because we're also trying to maintain courses that really require the full FTE that it takes to run the course. And so we have had ongoing conversations that I've been here with middle school counselors and administrators to ensure we're not running classes with 10 kids and so forth. So I think that that's an ongoing annual. Yep, and sometimes some courses this year have high interest, but then last year they didn't. And so it just is kind of part of an interesting process when you're working with middle school students and what their interests take on from year to year.
Amy, sixth grade band, sixth grade orchestra, do we have that this year? I thought we implemented that.
So that is,
Where does that fall under here?
so that falls under the sixth grade elective course descriptions, the link that's tied there. So yes, that is a part of the sixth grade elective offerings. Requirements, I guess, in that particular case, that they're choosing one of those elective options.
So are all of these classes currently being offered?
I would have to look at
Okay.
their current schedule for this quarter, but
Okay.
these are offered.
They are offered that have been in the past. So there's nothing new here that we're, okay.
Nope, any of the new recently approved
Yep.
elective courses would be down at the bottom, so
Yep.
under the STEAM, Maize and Blue, and then that creative music course. Those were board approved last year.
There's been nothing added since 2018 that didn't go through the board for approval.
Okay,
Does that help?
that's perfect.
And is this something we'll see then at next board that will actually have a motion for approval?
Correct, and then we'll have a date so that all of those are then,
Gotcha.
has been approved. And then, not that it's a heavy lift, but then the next is the high school courses, which we'll probably break those out by content area.
Sure.
And just take our time to go through it. We have the discussion as a board.
This is all housekeeping type kind of, okay.
We don't have dates for when the board has approved courses back
Sure.
a while. It's good, and it's good for the board to make sure that the courses that we're offering are not just approved in 1964, but approved more recently.
And then I think our previous conversation, not only do we have the process and procedure of how those courses come before the board for approval, but then
moving forward, an annual review of that list if needed.
Yeah, not that it matters at our level, but I would be interested to know some of the interest in some of these classes and how it ebbs and flows.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see some that are probably more relevant than others these days.
You like the art mud, the masterpiece one?
Well, yeah, I wish I had taken that one. I'm gonna try to get Zach to sign up for that one. Loving his choir class right now, though.
Any other questions for me?
It's just a good cleanup. This was not a tight process over the years, so this is just nice work getting this all in line. Nice work.
Yeah.
Okay. Next up is Superintendent Evaluation. And just to update everyone, Mr. Jay Bennett from MASB, I think probably everyone remembers him last year when he did our training. He is going to help to facilitate Dr. Vanderjack's evaluation, and that's going to occur on Monday, November 27th, and that's a work session. So please make every effort to be here if you can avoid any work conflicts. And then Dr. Vanderjack will give to us his completed self-evaluation 2 weeks prior. So by November 13th, Dr. Vanderjack will send to us his self-evaluation. And then in preparation for that meeting, board members in the past had to fill out their own evaluation. You do not have to do that this year. You will just come prepared with how you would rate Dr. Vanderjack, and then we will have a discussion. But Jay Bennett will help to facilitate all of that.
Now, I know in the past we've had supporting documentation for some of the rubrics, and I'm assuming we're following the same rubric and everybody understands how rubrics function, but is that something also that Dr. Vanderjack is going to include in our board shared documents, or are we asking for that later?
It will be up to Dr. Vanderjack how he opts to share that. In the past, Dr. Vanderjack, you've done links, right, in the self-evaluation, you've had links.
Yeah, last year you had a kind of an index, I would say, that linked to supporting documentation for each element within the rubric, within the framework. So we'll do the same thing.
Okay. Moving on, board goals. Some of the board members had the opportunity to attend the strategic planning sessions that were held in August. And a recommendation that came back from that was that we have some board goals. So I'd like to open it up for discussion as we talk about potential goals for the coming year.
Well, this is something that I asked to have added to the agenda. And some of the history, I think, and Ken and Mark, you could probably correct me if I'm wrong, but we created our code of conduct for the board when Nick Siglaric was superintendent. And I remember we kind of chuckled because it's like, why do we have to do this? Everything's great, everything's kosher, we're all good. Obviously some foresight on Nick Siglaric's part, that he recognized that the future is always uncertain. And so that's how those code of conduct items were created. And I think included in your shared document folder is a copy of the code of conduct that we all signed in January. We all recognize there have been individuals who have questioned whether we're all following those, and I think those are legitimate questions. So one of the items that I would consider valuable for us is to possibly make as a goal to highlight some of those items and talk about which areas we can improve on. Some of this, I think, also has to do with perceptions. So, for instance, number 13 of the Code of Conduct talks about, and I can read it specifically, I will render all decisions based on the available facts of my independent judgment and avoid undue or prejudicial influence of outside groups. Outside groups is a pretty broad category, but I think there are those who would say that some of us are influenced by outside groups. Whether that's real or not is another question. But I would like to see us have a conversation about what that looks like and what that means so that we are all on the same page.
Well, go ahead.
Sure. Another item, in fact, I'm going to pass out to everybody, something that I compiled when I was doing my particular human resource area of the SOAR goals. Mine was human resources, so we spent 2 days assessing what the stats were from the survey. And interestingly enough, I dug a little deeper just because I was on the Human Resources Committee. And in the staff survey, as well as in the parent survey, in this particular case, the board or board members was mentioned 272 times. In 2020, when you asked staff if they were somewhat or very satisfied with board leadership, it was 98%. This time, and I'm referencing pages 69 and 73, it's 60%. So we have a problem. And this is what I talked to you about a little bit that day, Nick, about whether or not as a board we can change that perception and what that would look like. Parents rely on staff. Clearly in the parent survey, the majority of comments regarding staff is very positive. And if the parents are relying on staff, but there's a disconnect between how the staff feels the board is functioning or how we're acting, I think we need to address that. So that's one of the items specifically. And so you'll see what I did is I broke down that. It's like, okay, deep dive into the verbatim comments. What was related to this 60% only are satisfied or somewhat satisfied? Basically, I broke it down into 10 categories, and you can read for yourself. But as I was going through this, it also occurred to me, we need to remember that our staff are not only staff, but a lot of them are members of this community and their parents. So they're not saying these things outside of a vacuum. And we can do better. I think as a board we can do better. And I think this is one area where I think we may be able to come up with some goals. How do we change perceptions? How do we change attitudes? What can we do to show a little bit, have people feel more respected? So that was what I had in mind. And then the third thing I had in mind in thinking about goals for the board is relating to, in our code of conduct, number 8. I'll be committed to the growth and development of my skills as a board member by attending local, state, and national learning sessions when practical. We all have busy lives. I'm sure Ken and Mark have been through a bunch of conferences and classes, as have I. But I wonder whether or not, again, with foresight, where we are with new members and where new members might come in the future, whether we should make as one of our board goals, can we request, because we obviously can't demand, but can we request and expect that board members will attend at least 1 or 2 MASB classes a year? Especially thinking of the new board members. If you've never attended a conference, and I think of, Greg and yourself, Nick, I think that it can be overwhelming. At least it was for me until I went to some of these classes and got a bigger framework for what my role as a board member is. How I interact with the superintendent, how I deal with staff, how we address when people come to us. It's really easy sometimes, at least back in the day, you would just talk to somebody and tell them what you thought. But that's not what we're supposed to do. We're not supposed to speak individually. We're supposed to speak on behalf of the board. And, encouraging parents to go to the teacher, go to the principal, then go to, the central office, and then to the superintendent, and then finally to the board. And we've gotten away from that. And I think it has put some cogs in the wheel. Not saying we shouldn't be informed by community members and parents and staff, but I think it makes us a little less cohesive. And the idea that we understand and recognize, number 3, that we have no legal authority, but our authority comes from the actions of the board as a majority. And if we're talking to individuals outside of school, as we used to say, I think that can produce a problem. So in my mind, those are 3 areas that I specifically thought of that I would like to think about doing goals around. And if there are others that we would like to consider, I think this will be a process. Just like we're expecting our staff and central office to create goals for our district, short-term, long-term, ongoing. I think we're lifelong learners too, and I think this is part of a process that may bring a little bit more cohesion and present a more accurate picture as to what our goals are.
Thank you, Dawn.
Could you
I just-
briefly summarize those three for me again, so I can write them down?
Sure. One is to talk through our code of conduct and see which areas we can improve on. Number two was to talk about some of the comments on the staff and parents, if someone wants to do a deep dive into that as well, about how we can change perception, but also maybe consider how we can present ourselves in a way that facilitates a better relationship with the staff, particularly just because that 60% number to me is disturbing. To go from 98 to 60% is significant. And what does that mean? I mean, again, my look says most of it fits into these 10 categories, but I look through all of the comments. And some of those are perceptions, some of those, I think, are legitimate. And then the third thing was MASB class attendance or conference. Can we encourage each other to find an opportunity to do some of that work?
Thank you.
I just want to thank you, Dawn, and I think we can touch on number 3 real quick. MASB, I personally have attended all of the level 100. I've done all of them. And I believe Nick has completed.
Yeah, I've done all 9 of
as
them,
well.
for sure, so.
And I don't, Greg, I don't know where you're at.
I'm going to be doing those within the next 60 days. I've got some time when I'm going to be laid up, and I've got
Same here. I'll taking some of those classes this fall and winter.
The good classes, what's nice is they're online. And they're easy to get through.
Yeah.
And I'm sure Mark and Ken have attended some, and I have too, before they even kept track of whether you did classes or not. So in addition to this current board, maybe we need to, and it's sort of spelled out in the code of conduct, but maybe we need to be a little bit more adamant that anyone new coming on, that's an expectation. And I think that expectation needs to be met as soon as you can, preferably before the first meeting or two when you're a board member, because otherwise you start out really rough, in my opinion. I would have.
It's a lot to go through 9 courses for the
Yeah,
first meeting.
yeah, but you know,
None of
that
them
even.
had my login credentials.
There you go, yeah.
But-
But you recognize what I'm saying.
100%.
Again, unless you've been on a board before or know someone who's been on a school board, you don't know what you don't know. And I was thankful that I came on the board when there was very little conflict, very little attendance. I had some great leaders around me, gave me great advice, were good mentors. So it was a little easier transition, but that's not the world I don't think we live in, and I don't know if that's going to change.
Great point. I think, yeah, we have, I look at it, you can think about things we can all improve upon, but we have a pretty good mix of 3 of you have nearly 70 years of experience on the board. Like, there's a lot of wisdom there that us new folks can learn from. Obviously, we have different perspective, different stages of life that I think we bring value, but yeah, I learned a lot from those first 9 classes that I've taken, but I'd be really interested, and I'm not gonna put you on the spot right now, but yeah, what are the next ones that I should be doing to, whether they be in person or, yeah, it's great, there's so many that are like on demand right now, but maybe that's a note that I can send the 3 of you from your experience.
Yeah, some of it also is, when you get to those 200 and 300s, it becomes personal preference for a lot of things. You want to know more or as Dawn said, your background. You may have a reasonable background in finance, and you know, okay, I think I got the finance piece, or I want to understand curriculum development or whatever. Yeah, so, their offerings have continued to expand. The virtual opportunity has made it much easier to engage in courses. So, yeah, I really like all 3 of those goals. I think those are really thoughtful and good perspectives. And I like the idea of, even if it's not I don't know if you were proposing that we that we go through all of this in one sitting, or I thought I heard you maybe recommend that maybe we take 2 of them And in one meeting, we deep dive to particular, and what does that mean to each board member, and expand on that.
Yeah,
Or we could do it, all in one
right.
work session, but either way, I like the idea of deep diving into these, because you can read the words, but the words mean different things to different people, so I think it's a great idea.
I would like that we have this conversation, that we go in with that everyone is here because they love kids, and we try to look at the good in everyone.
Mhm.
I think sometimes people on the board or even in the audience make very inaccurate assumptions.
Mhm.
And you're right, I have spent 2 weekends going through all the comments, highlighting them. And you're right, John, we've gone down, and it is concerning. So, and I look back and I actually made a couple notes. And, I was not endorsed by the teachers union. As a matter of fact, none of us were endorsed by the teachers union. And there's been some tough decisions, tough votes that we've had to make. I know I personally have spent hours researching data, and I look at the data, and there's been times where I would find errors and stuff that would be sent to us. I know I've sent stuff to Ken, I've sent stuff to Doug, like this is not reported correctly. But I don't know what the teachers union has sent out to the teachers. I don't know, but I'm just going to pick on the ruler vote. There was a lot in here about not supporting SEL. I think if we go back and look at the videotaping of that, I know I supported SEL. I actually said in my statement, I actually copied it. I said, I do support SEL, but I wanted to support an SEL program that also fosters teaching characteristics that are important for all students to have as they navigate their future, and not one that is so controversial that it requires significant modification to be suitable. So I'm trying to look for a way to do a compromise. So if there were teachers at that meeting. So if I was a teacher and if I went back to report to my other teachers, they would have said, well, Hooper voted no. She didn't support ruler. That's a correct. But then they didn't say, but she supported SEL. She just wanted a different curriculum. So a lot of it is, I believe there's some miscommunication and how things have gone back. I know a few meetings back, I had brought up about board relations and what can we do to improve our relations with the teachers. And it was pretty much crickets around the table. Because I think there's things that we can do. I will share last year I went into a room, all the board members were invited to a teacher's room. And I went, and I never felt so ostracized in my entire life. I was never introduced to the students. I sat down at a table, I was never introduced, I was never acknowledged. And these poor students probably wondered, who is this lady sitting in our room? And I thought that's how I was treated. I was appalled. So, yeah, I think there's work we need to do. As a matter of fact, I had emailed Dr. Vanderjack, I think on Friday, what opportunities do we have for the board to get involved either on committees or in different schools? What opportunities do we have to start to build that bridge? Because I believe there's been a lot of miscommunication, a lot. And so I know I have tried to look for the good in everyone. Because I know things have been said and I'm like, that's not how that went down. But I can certainly see where it looks bad, but that's not what happened. But it's how it was presented.
Which are understandable comments. I would caution us, any board member, about, I'll just say this, becoming defensive and justifying things that were said or comments that were made or whatever in the past. It's water under the bridge. We're at where we're at now. Again, I think we look at activities going forward. There's miscommunication and misperception on both sides. There's actions that this board has taken that has driven down trust. Again, you all know my feelings about the superintendent evaluation. There's an opportunity right in front of us. But be that as it may, we move forward. We'll do the evaluation. We move forward. So, but I think what's past is past, so we move forward, we look at goals going forward and how we move forward, but I don't think we spend a lot of time justifying decisions that were made. But the staff and the teachers' perspectives are their perspectives. Their perceptions are their perceptions. For most, that means their perceptions of their reality, whether we like it or not, on any of us. So I think that's how we have to look at it and move forward. So, and I think that's what you're proposing. Yeah.
How do we move forward? How do we move forward?
Yeah, I think we are collectively as a board, hopefully, in a better spot than even 4 or 5 months ago to do that. I know as I've gotten to sit here and, not that I didn't appreciate all of you beforehand, but I've actually gotten to know you more on a personal level. Hey, there's someone who has these strengths and these strengths. And Andrew, what you said the other night, I was like, that's the nail on the head. We can just treat each other better. Hey, we're all here together. I think, some of it, we're a collective board. We're not one individual. So I think in life it's a little bit easier to call it a board because there's not a face to it necessarily. So sometimes that's what happens there. That's what we signed up for. All of our meetings are recorded and we've got spectators. So I view it as a tremendous opportunity in how we collectively engage with each other, treat each other, and how we look at each other sometimes. I think we all do have a certain level of respect for each other. We're all really diverse knowledge bases and life experiences. I'm excited to be a part of this board. I'm glad that you came and after the SOAR meeting, I was like, hey, I think we're in a spot we need to talk about some of these things. Yeah, some of the things that we want to address are in the past, but it's moving forward, and I think as a group we all have the same goal in mind: help kids, help every kid, help every student, and I appreciate you putting in the work to put this together. I'm excited to move forward with everybody.
So where do we want to start?
Did you
Yes,
talk
I-
about it tonight?
Well,
Want to talk
and I
about tonight?
think,
You want us to think about
I
it?
think the goal was to introduce my thoughts, to see if there were other things that individuals felt as a board we needed to work on. And then I think to some degree, I don't say crafting goals, but to Ken's point, I do think there would be value in, provided we have time over the next several work sessions, to go through several of the code of conduct statements. Go through 1 through 4, and then go through 5 through 8, that sort of thing, so that we can talk about what that means, because there are some very specific incidences that I can see in my mind where I felt that either as a board, we may have violated these, or certain members have violated these. And a code of conduct is only as good as the accountability. And if we're going to sign a code of conduct saying this is how we're going to act, to me, we need an opportunity, not necessarily in a public way, but in a private fashion, to call up. I said, hey, Ken, what you just said, I feel like that was a violation of our code of conduct. That's my starting point. It's not, Ken, I don't like what you said, or I think that was really mean. It was like, I think you may have violated our code of conduct. To me, that's what this document is about. I would have liked to have been able to do something like that the past couple of years. But because of the way things have been, any mention of that was not taken very well. And I think if we're going to sign a document saying this is what we adhere to, I want to make sure we all understand what that means, and that we all have an opportunity to say, where can we do better? Where could we have been perceived as ignoring our own code of conduct? Just like you would say a policy manual. If the staff ignored a policy, we call them on it, right? Granted, we're not employees, this is a volunteer position, but to take our job seriously, that's what I would like to see with that. And as far as things that we could perhaps do to better the relationship with the staff, I think that's going to take some thought and maybe some conversation and maybe some input, whether it be from, you're like, what, me? From Ann, from an HR perspective, from Doug, as the superintendent perspective. Because I don't want to create something busy and have some ice cream social thinking that's going to take care of it all. It does come down to sometimes what we say, and even though we need to share our thoughts and opinions before a vote, I think there is a degree of lack of respect when there's constant questions about a professional's opinion. And so those are the kind of things that I would like us to do, and I don't believe it would be wise for us to go through the whole list in one night, or even to start on some of that without everyone sort of going through the list I provided, looking at the code of conduct again, thinking about some of those things and say, okay, where am I here? Or does this not even belong in here? Maybe we don't say this. I know for sure when we first created this code of conduct, there was a board member who hardly was ever here. Ken was very proactive in a very kind way to point out to that person that you're clearly not attending or participating hardly at all. That's a violation of the code of conduct that we signed. And I think that's appropriate, in my opinion. So that's how I would say I would like to see it proceed, for everyone to have some time to digest, to think about a certain number of the code of conduct that maybe we can discuss at the next work session.
Thoughts by anyone else?
I think that approach makes sense. When we sat through the SOAR meetings and digested all the data and all the comments and things like that, I think there were comments within each of the categories, each of the groups that addressed the board in some way, shape, or form. And I think some of us found ourselves, those of us that were there, found ourselves trying to take some of those comments about the board and kind of fit them into some of the other great things that our district is doing from a curriculum perspective and from an HR perspective, whatever it was, and special services, whatever. And I found myself thinking, and I think I may have shared this with some of you already, I may have with you, Doug, thinking like our goals should be, I think our board goals should be separate than those goals. And when you look at the goals that we had in our last SOAR, the last version of SOAR, there was a number of great goals. I think sprinkling in some of our board things into that would be appropriate. So we have to think about what that looks like in terms of presenting this to others. And I think frankly, having the conversation about these things and looking for ways to continuously improve already shows to the community some increased transparency and some acknowledgement that there's a little bit of dysfunction here, right? Let's be honest with ourselves. There's some dysfunction, but we're working on trying to improve it. I think that goes a long way. So I have some thoughts about interactions with teachers, interactions with other administrators, what that could look like that I'm willing to talk through. I have the benefit of having some former teachers that are still in the school. And so for me to knock on a door or get in there, talk to Mr. Beal and walk through the halls and just say, hey, Mr. Anderson, how are things going, right? Or what are you seeing that the board is doing, or how the board is behaving that is not in line with sort of teachers' expectations, right? And like have candid conversations about those things. That asking for that feedback and saying, what am I doing well, or how can we work better, or in your eyes, how should we move forward? I think getting that feedback and asking those questions and just being available, I think also shows that we care. Right, and I talk about teachers, but the same is true with parents and other community members, right? Making sure people understand that we are listening, that we do acknowledge that there's room for improvement, and that we're willing to work together collaboratively to hopefully improve as we go. I think that'll go a really long way. So I also appreciate the discussion, and there's a lot that we can do. I think key to all of this is biting off just the right amount. I think it's going to be very easy for all of us to go down rabbit holes or to point fingers. I think in order for this to be productive, we shouldn't point fingers. We should talk about our relationship together as a whole and not one-on-one, and to make sure that we set some kind of boundaries around what this should look like and what these discussions are going to be. So I don't know. That's a lot, but those are my thoughts.
Yeah, I think I kind of echo you. This can be a really healthy exercise as proposed, if we all come at it with a sense of humility and things that we want to improve upon. I am a little hesitant in that it could spiral into, we talk about things that we've failed on, which if it's appropriate in discussion, say, hey, here's an instance where we could have done better. I want, this can be a very positive thing. If we don't do it well, if the conversations aren't conducted appropriately, it can cause, I think, more fractions. So just, I would encourage everybody to go into these meetings with humility and a willingness to work together and own, like Mr. Hegel says, at South, you own it. And if we've had situations where we need to own something, let's do it. But be more about moving forward and what can we do better going forward.
Yeah, and just as an example, like, I've been on the board for how long now, and I should have more MASB classes under my belt, right? Like, there's no excuse for that. I'm gonna own it, I'm gonna take more, I'm gonna be more engaged on training and be better, right? Like, things like that, I think, having open conversations about those things, and frankly, being responsible for our actions and the perceptions of our actions, I think will be important too.
Barb, you had said something earlier about asking for some input from the board, and you heard just crickets shooting your feet. What was the issue there?
A couple meetings ago, I had asked, I think you were here, I had
It was
asked
in
about
June,
board.
and I wasn't there yet.
No.
I was like my
I had
granddaughter.
looked at the survey.
Yes.
At that point, I had already looked at the survey
Yes,
results.
yeah.
I had looked through, and I was concerned with what I had read.
Yeah.
So I was looking for how can the board improve relations, in particular with the teachers and parents, and it was kind of like crickets around the table. That was by way of, okay, let's have a conversation about what can we do to make it better.
Yeah, I apologize for not speaking, which is very rare.
I think
for
you
me
did.
For not speaking.
Sorry,
And I don't want to get ahead of the game, but we're going to talk about putting some sessions together. My immediate response to that, Barb, would be, the best thing is to get people face to face. And teachers who have concerns should feel comfortable coming to board members and expressing those concerns. Board members should be welcome to the classrooms. I was glad to have this information here in succinct form, but, and actually, I was glad to hear this, because I think that we need to be in front of the teachers, we need to be in front of those who have the concerns. You can't solve problems with intermediaries, you gotta be face to face. So that would be my simple solution. Get us in front of the people who don't like us.
We're some further discussion. There's, again, we have to, again, code of conduct and how we think about that. And it says in a certain one, how issues are brought up and how they're addressed, parents and teachers and so forth. And we have to be, I agree that getting folks around the table in a room is beneficial in the context of the code of conduct. So I agree with Dawn. We come back to this document as our guiding document.
And I didn't see anything wrong with getting together.
I didn't say there was anything wrong with it. I said we just have to do it in the context of the code of conduct.
Okay.
It's easy for someone to, then in a one-to-one conversation, to assume wrongly or rightly that how you feel is how the board feels, or your opinion on something is how everybody else feels. So the one danger with the one-on-one is that it can be misconstrued and it reflects on all of us, even though that maybe was not your intent. So I appreciate what Ken is saying in that it's great to be one-on-one, but I also think to some degree, some of that process of going through the proper channels also helps to keep boundaries around conversations. And I'm not saying specifically yours with the individual staff, but I think it also speaks a little bit, and I would love for someone to do a deep dive into the parent survey too, but sometimes in an effort to satisfy our taxpayers and community members, it's easy to speak out of turn if that was not the proper protocol. For a community member to come to me directly with an issue that really should have gone to the principal or should have gone to the superintendent, I think we have gotten a little bit fuzzy with that. And that's the risk you take with direct conversations outside of the chain. But we should be able to have conversations with people if they're willing to address how they feel about a decision we made, even if it's just to vocalize to us how they feel. But being careful also to not comment in a way that is assumed to be the whole board. Yeah.
You know, I kind of agree with Mark. I'm going to take every opportunity that I have to be able to talk to as many people as I can one-on-one. And I will put the stipulation out there that I am not speaking for the board as a whole. I'm speaking for Greg Chansky here. These are my observations. These are the things that I think are important. These are the things that I stand for. And within the context of the board, I'm going to be working with the rest of the board to move that forward. But we can't say on the one hand that there's this huge gap over where the board is perceived to be and where the staff perceives us to be, and on the other hand, try to put some constraints on being able to have those conversations. I've never been in a situation before on any board or anything that I've been working on where there's these caveats about, well, you better be careful how you say this or you say that. And I understand completely. The first meeting, Ken said, you have to make sure that people understand that you're not talking to the whole board. So I basically put that disclaimer on whenever anybody calls me or says anything to me. And I have worked very hard, if I've got any questions or anything like that should go to the administration, to send them to the administration. And I will continue to do that because that's Dr. Vanderjack's responsibility to run this place. My responsibility is to evaluate how he does that. And we're going to be doing that coming up in the very near future. And I think that's a very, very important aspect of everything that we do. And I look forward to that opportunity. And I look forward to what everybody on this board has to say about it. But I am not going to put any constraints whatsoever on talking to anybody about what I believe is best for this district. And I wouldn't expect that any of you would either.
And I'm certainly not talking about putting constraints on.
Right.
You prefaced your comments with, I make it clear that it's I'm here to listen. I have views. I'll share my views as Greg Chansky, not speaking for the whole board.
Right.
And as long as there's a thoughtfulness and then you went on to say that I will be very disciplined about making sure that the right concerns go through the right channels.
Exactly.
And that's the context
Right.
in which I'm talking.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that.
I see no issue
Right.
with
I
your
didn't
approach.
think you would.
Yeah.
I just wanted to be very clear about this analysis. I've got an obligation to the people of this district, and I take that seriously. And I told people what I stood for when I ran, and if they didn't want me here, I wouldn't be here. So I appreciate all this feedback and this back and forth, but as I look through this code of conduct, I don't see anything that frankly anybody in this room has violated. We may have different observations about it, but I believe that this isn't our problem. We just have different points of views.
Somewhat different.
Right, absolutely.
We'll get into it. Some of us have different perspectives on code of conduct application and the other follow.
Mhm.
Talk about it.
Good.
I think in terms of a process and a protocol and how you engage with individuals, particularly with teachers, I know, just don't want to belabor this, but with the ruler discussion, right? I wanted to know as much as I could about that curriculum and what the teachers thought about it before I wrote it. And so, with Doug's advice, I want to talk to a bunch of teachers. I want to talk to a bunch of teachers. So with Doug's advice, he said, you may talk to teachers. This is how I recommend doing it. Talk to the building principal. Make sure the building principal understands that, and then have the conversations. So there were a number of instances where I had either a phone call or an in-person meeting with teachers, and the principal decided they wanted to be in the room or on the phone as well, just so that you maintain that understanding that, listen, there is a channel to go through. I'm not just gonna send you make a phone call or show up at your door and ask you these questions. There's a process and there's a way for us to do that. I think that'll be important for us as we continue to look for ways to engage with teachers in more ways, so that we're all doing the same or similar things when it comes to that engagement. And we're not surprising any teachers, we're not surprising others on the board. The other note, real quick, in terms of those types of conversations, I know, Greg, that you talked to a lot of members of the community about a lot of things, and I think that's great. I would love it if, maybe this is a goal, right? When we have conversations with members of the community that have strong opinions about things, or who are upset or whatever about something, we find a way to share some of those sentiments with the rest of the board. Personally, for me, when I get an email from an individual community member, or have a conversation with somebody that I think is, it would be worth sharing with others on the board, I make sure that either I tell those people one-on-one, or I put it in an email so that everyone can see the same sorts of things. I don't think that we need to kind of micromanage those communications, but I would love to hear more about those engagements that affect me, right? And I feel like sometimes some of us have individual conversations with individual community members. Those sentiments aren't shared, so the divide just grows because we're not talking, because we're all sitting here being recorded, and you know what I mean, that sort of thing. So anyway, those are just some more high-level thoughts. I don't know if that matters.
Yeah, and I want to just piggyback on what you said about Dr. Vanderjagt giving you some advice on how to approach it. He did the same thing with me. When I told him that I wanted to speak to the principals and stuff, he said, hey, let me go about it this way, and it worked out fine. And I appreciate his advice on that and his counsel on that, and it was very helpful. And I don't have any problem talking to anybody about any conversation that I have with people, about what they think, about what they expect, about, what my thoughts are on those types of things. I've had several pointed conversations with several board members here, and I respect what everybody has to say, and I respect their right to be able to say it. So.
Just one more comment about the teachers. I think it's just hard not to like people when you're face-to-face and talking to them. And I'm not looking for what format we have, but we've got to get ourselves face-to-face with teachers. Maybe they don't. Actually, my wife baked cookies twice, and I took them to one of the elementary buildings, and they didn't like me as much as they liked the cookies, but we had a great conversation, a good time. And that's what it takes. It's hard not to like people when you're face-to-face with them. It doesn't have to be formal, it can be informal. But maybe we have to do something to structure it so we get into the buildings and see the teachers.
I think because then there's not the level of miscommunication.
That's right, because it goes to
There's
somebody else and they don't know what really said.
It's like the telephone game. If we started with Pat and I told you something, by the time it got back over to Dr. Vanderjagt, it would be completely different.
I have another Rockwell picture on my wall at home with all the gossip going on, and then by the time it gets back, it's not the same thing. So, gotta get face to face.
All right. So maybe on our next work session, we take 1 through 5, if we can get it done in 3.
That'd be great, yeah.
1 through 5, okay.
Two things, Dr. Hooper.
Yeah.
Traditionally, the board signs this in January. So if we try to do October, November, December, we don't have a planned work session in December.
Yeah.
And we have a pretty busy one in November.
Right.
Not to change your plan, I'm just saying that
Yeah,
maybe that's a discussion one.
Yeah.
Well, this one can grandfather us until we get the news.
Yeah, I think it's important that
I'm not
we
worried
do
about
the
that.
work and then sign it. And I think it's important to take it chunks at a time, because it's going to get kind of deep.
There's no hurry.
Any other questions on board goals?
No more questions, just one more comment. I think having an open mind for all of us, having an open mind and also keeping in mind our tone when we talk about these very important things. will be important. And I know we're all adults here, but these are things that can get heated and personal. And when that happens, we lose all productivity. So just a final comment, we'll talk more about it later. That's just my 2 cents. No, that's not.
Assume the good in everyone.
That's right. Thank you.
Great, so we're going to finish with a roundtable, and we're actually going to start with Dr. Vanderjagt.
Thanks. I'd like to share 2 things. Number one, here's an updated status here. Thank you, Stephanie, and curriculum and the team. I sent around. We've got some additional test results in there that we talked about last board meeting, which was last week. We're still waiting on some data when it comes to mental health supports, student-teacher ratio, housing projects. Some of that work is still will be updated, but just to give you the latest. Excuse me, we do plan on the October work session to dive deeper into the data with the testing, but we'll have more information when that we didn't talk about. I want to share that with you. And then I have a disturbing bad reviews. There's a letter addressed to each of you that was mailed to the district. Thanks to, I'm just going to say Stephanie, for a little detective work. Apparently there's an organization out there that has sent these letters to every board member in the state of Florida and Tennessee, in every district that has banned a book. So you get your copy. If you don't want it, you're welcome to throw it away. I just can't throw anything away that's addressed to board, and so you're going to get a copy. I will tell you that it's not pretty. So it has nothing to do with our district. But I'll let you open them and see it. Ken, yours is open because it was the first one we got, and we want to see it. So I didn't open it. But so if you don't want it, you want to leave it with me, that would be great. We were going to share it with all of Ottawa County, see what other districts had received one, but nobody else has received one because nobody else had banned a book. So that's why I got it. Open with caution, how's that? It doesn't have anything chemical in it. Open with- You'll understand when you open it. But I want to share that as a team so you can understand some context to why you got it. So, and it just went to the board. It didn't go to administration. And we contemplated it, in all honesty, not giving it to you because you're going to find that there's no value to it. But everything addressed to the board goes to the board. That's it.
Anything tonight?
You know, one thing I just would like to share with the board that you might not know about is just we are doing a lot of active work for wellness of our staff. And I know at the kickoff you might have heard that we purchased this thing called Schoolmint, which is basically a Calm or a Headspace, if you've heard that app, but it's for educators. And so that's kicked off. We got a lot of great feedback from our support staff on that. But then we just have a lot of different initiatives going on. And you know, we talk a lot about mental health for our students, but mental health of our staff is very, very important. And so I would encourage, if you guys ever, you know, are in buildings and see any displays or in the teacher's lounge or anything like that, just we're trying to make touch points everywhere to just make sure that staff knows that obviously they're valued, but more importantly, like they're recognized that this is hard and there's help if you need it. So I just want to point that out.
On Friday, we had our first early release of the year, and we're finding that the connector spaces at the high school are great spaces for large group professional learning. And so there was a lot going on at the high school. We had high school staff there. We had some instructional paraprofessional training going on. All of our elementary staff was at the high school, and a plethora of different topics that our staff are engaged in on those days. It is very meaningful. First glances at feedback from post-session surveys are very good.
And on that note, because it's a half day, our construction crew will be in there and do work also to make up. It just happened to be, shellacking's a bad term, but the main staircase at the high school, they had it covered, and so it was blocked off. So it got creative, making sure people could find their way. Kids can find their way easy to go upstairs now. Adults, we helped them out.
Especially elementary staff.
Yeah,
Needed
like,
to
where do
go
we
up there.
go?
They're like, what, where? Here we go, follow me. It's all good.
Can we just see some trends on, don't add it to this, don't, just when you got a moment to run some stuff, some trends on AP classes offered and AP enrollees?
Yeah, that's not updated yet, but when it does, we can look at some trends.
Yeah, we'll pass on, yeah.
And that's the nice thing about doing this now, at the beginning of every month.
Right.
We'll be able to look at this a year ago, 2 years ago. We just started it last year,
Yeah,
we give
right.
you some trendy data. 3 years is usually what we use for trends, but
Yeah.
we can
Then
definitely
you got COVID and
go back to
kind of
this.
skewed everything, so, yeah, we get it.
Yeah.
Thank you, that's it.
I'm good, thank you.
Good.
I'm fine.
Nothing to do with school, but I'm going out to a board meeting in Pennsylvania. I serve on a board that sends professionals to the 1040 window, mostly doctors, nurses, and engineers. And one of our doctors in Afghanistan was taken prisoner by the Taliban just 2 days ago, along with like 15 others. So they're just a very brutal people. She's a lovely middle-aged lady. All she is a doctor. She does nothing else except treat medical needs. So if you're afraid, you're afraid.
Pat?
Thanks. Just one of the tougher things, I would say, of a lot of our careers has been, in the last 5 years, of five bus drivers. It's not just me, but it's pushed us in ways that I never thought I'd ever be pushed.
Did I hear you were driving the bus?
No.
Oh, you were answering phone calls at the bus.
Yeah. Yes, and that's brings up another good question. We thought about that, but that gets another conversation. But a good conversation is just that we realize we're gonna hire our bus drivers from Hudsonville. And that's, as you can imagine, homes are becoming more expensive in Hudsonville. And that's really, I think that's where they're gonna come from. They're gonna come from our community. We're not getting people to come from surrounding communities to drive here. There are very few. There's some people who live here, who have sold their house here and made a lot of money selling their house, that have moved to what you consider a more affordable community outside the district. But it's not, we don't have a lot of people driving in, just because they can drive the bus in the district they live in, and you gotta report to work twice. That's usually why people drive in the district they live in. And Dr. Vanderjack hosts, and you were there, Dawn, in the ISAC, and it really went aha to me that, and these were people saying, if you would just do this, I'll drive. But they thought part of the fear of driving the bus wasn't just operating the big yellow vehicle. It was to have, what?
I was like.
She's trying to follow the ISAC.
ISAC. Yeah, okay, got it, sorry. I apologize, keep going.
I think that's good stuff.
Yeah.
But part of the fear is not just operating the bus, it's having all the kids behind you. And it never registered with me until those leaders shared that, because most bus drivers, it's like a classroom teacher, so they want to run their own show. And if there's something going on with the kid, Dr. Vanderjack and I have ridden, everybody's ridden those buses, principals have ridden the bus, and you get on there that it doesn't happen. But most bus drivers want to control that, so I think that's a solution that we're going to look more at. And we've given our director more latitude. It's not exactly easy to find aides either to ride the bus, but it's tougher to find a bus driver. So that's something I think that, as a result of that, and really listening deeply to what they said, it might make a difference. It hasn't made a difference yet with people we've talked to, but I think it could make a difference in the future.
They're just on track with the behaviors of the kids on the bus?
Yeah, I talked to a guy at the repair shop today, and he said, I did that before in another situation. I said, well, talk to your friends. And he said, my friends are afraid. I said, well, have you seen Hudsonville kids? We have cameras on most of the buses, almost all the buses. And kids act pretty well. They're pretty responsible here. Principals support discipline. It's not like you might think in other districts with discipline. And he's like, oh, really? I said, yeah. I said, it's pretty good. Now kids, if you want every kid to sit there like this, it's unrealistic, because they're kids. I mean, they're blowing off steam. They're not like that in the morning. It's great to be a morning driver. A lot of them are pretty sleepy in the morning. But they get wound up in the afternoon. And the person just said, I had no idea. So it's gonna take all of us together to solve this problem. And we really need to keep promoting. We will give an aid to somebody, but there's gonna be a time when they don't want another adult on that bus. They want to run their own show, they want to do it their way, and that's fine, because it's really successful, so.
Well, I think you hit on something that we deal with, we've touched on tonight, is the perception. There's a perception out there that there's lawlessness on our school buses, when that maybe not the case all the time. So how do we all work together to positively send a message in a lot of different ways?
Yes.
And how
I don't have all the
many
answers.
drivers are we short?
We need 10 today.
We're short 8, but we need 10.
Yeah. We'll just fill.
You know, and the irony of that whole situation is because we don't have enough drivers, the school routes are so much longer, and the kids are just,
We got 3 routes, right?
yeah, so.
And they're stacking up. I mean,
Exactly.
go out, come back, go out, come back, yeah.
And one of our kids got home just in time to get in the bus to go back yesterday. But no, I mean, really, like you said, it's so difficult trying to find those people to do it. Is there anything we can do other than I could put a billboard on as I walk around
You could drive.
Yeah, I could try. Is there anything else I could do?
Supplement the income when you retire.
As long as it's not December, January, February, I maybe consider it.
I will, one real quick thing on that. I mean, having gone through all the training and being through every year or two, you have to sit in on Saturday and go through the class. I will say that training, but to be totally honest, it can be scary. I mean, and I know that that's intentional, but I would not be surprised if there are people that start that process and quit because of the videos they show. It's reality, right? But of the videos they show, the news reports that they display about horrible things that could happen on a bus, including children getting hit by a car, right? Like, those are realities that obviously our bus drivers need to know about, but I was like, who would want to drive a bus after going through that? Seriously. So I know that that's outside of our control. I mean, that's outside of our control. We're not gonna manage or change that, but it's something that I've observed firsthand that might not be helpful for us.
Now, Andrew, when you're saying that, remember you're speaking for Andrew, you're not
I'm speaking for myself.
the board.
Thank you. I'm speaking for myself.
Just wanted to make certain that.
Yeah. You know, we need bus drivers and we need great bus drivers. And frankly, the things that they show and that they talk about probably aren't super applicable to Hudsonville, right? But anyway, just another data point.
All right.
Barb, I would, one more
Yeah.
quick thing. I strongly suggest that you as president document the goals that we talked about for alignment across the board, and then get those out to all the board members and Dr. Vanderjack. So there's, we may tweak them as we go, but a common document that we're all
We decided
working
that those
for.
would be our 3 goals. I didn't kind of get that.
I thought I heard that the reviewing
I
of
heard a
the
recommendation,
code of
reviewing
conduct,
the code of conduct.
the
that
classwork, and we can start with
The
the.
MASB,
Yeah.
and then the other one was to review the comments of the parent and staff survey.
I wrote it down too.
And then we can, yeah, that's what I had done, and then we can discuss how we continue on that third journey. So,
There could
that
be-
way we're all aligned.
There could be goals that stem from our review of the code of conduct that are already captured.
And again, in the context of keeping us all aligned, that would be helpful.
All right, with that, I will take a motion for adjournment.
I'll move that.
Support by Mark, support from Andrew. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All right, we are adjourned.